Imagine writing a book so powerful, so precise, so perfectly constructed that over 2,000 years later, it is still being read, still being studied, and still being used to train some of the greatest minds in human history. Imagine that your book would go on to be printed more times than almost any other work in human history, second only to the Bible. And now imagine this. Nobody knows your birthday. Nobody knows the day you died. Nobody knows what you look like. Nobody even knows for certain where you were born. That man is Euclid. And by the end of this video, I will reveal one shocking truth about Euclid that most people, even mathematicians, never think about. So stay with me, all the way to the end. Welcome to Numbers and Narratives by Blesswright, the place where history breathes, numbers tell stories, and the greatest minds of the ancient world come alive again. If you are new here, welcome home. This channel exists for curious minds, for people who don't just want to know what happened in history, but want to feel it. If that is you, hit that subscribe button right now and tap the notification bell so you never miss a story. And for those of you who are already part of this community, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Now let us begin. To understand Euclid, you must first understand the world he stepped into. And what a world it was. The year is approximately 300 BCE. Alexander the Great is dead. His vast empire, stretching from Greece to India, has been carved up by his generals, men who fought like lions over the bones of a kingdom. In Egypt, one of those generals, a brilliant and calculating man named Ptolemy, the first Soter, he has seized the throne. But Ptolemy is not only a warrior, he is a dreamer. He looks at this land of ancient pyramids and timeless sands and he thinks, I will build something the world has never seen. Not just a city, not just a palace, a beacon of human knowledge. And so he builds Alexandria. Alexandria, Egypt, a city named for the conqueror who imagined it. Sitting at the edge of the Mediterranean like a jewel pressed into the throat of the ancient world. Its harbor buzzing with ships from Greece, Persia, Rome, Carthage, Phoenicia. Every known civilization flowing into one extraordinary place. And at the heart of this city, Ptolemy constructs the Mouseion, what we would later call the Museum of Alexandria, and connected to it, the legendary Library of Alexandria. This was not just a building full of scrolls, and this was the single greatest concentration of human knowledge ever assembled in one place up to that point in history. And into this world walks Euclid. Here is the painful truth that every historian of mathematics must reckon with. We know almost nothing about Euclid the man, not his birth year, not his death year, not his hometown, not his family, not even the shape of his face. What we do know comes almost entirely from a single ancient source, a philosopher and mathematician named Proclus, who wrote about Euclid roughly 700 years after Euclid lived. 700 years. That is the equivalent of us today relying on a historian from the 1300s, the age of the Black Death, to tell us the details of someone's life. Proclus tells us that Euclid came before the mathematician Archimedes, and that he lived during the reign of Ptolemy I. This dates Euclid's active career to roughly 300 BCE, give or take a few decades. That is the best anchor we have. There is one other ancient account, from a philosopher named Pappus of Alexandria, who suggests Euclid was gentle, kind, and modest. Not a man who sought fame, not a man who craved applause, a man who loved the truth of numbers and shapes with a quiet, burning devotion. Some historians believe Euclid likely studied at Plato's Academy in Athens before coming to Alexandria, because the mathematical tradition that fills his great work is deeply Platonic, deeply Greek in its reasoning and structure. But even this is inference, a careful, educated inference, but inference nonetheless. So we are left with a paradox that is almost unbearable. The most influential mathematician in all of human history is, in personal terms, almost invisible. He is a voice without a face, a mind without a biography, and yet, what a voice, what a mind. Around 300 BCE, Euclid sits down, somewhere in Alexandria, perhaps in the shade of the great library itself, surrounded by the scrolls of the mathematicians who came before him. And he begins to write. What he produces is called the Stoicheia, in English, the Elements. 13 books, not chapters, books. Each one a complete world of mathematical reasoning. Books 1 through 6 cover plane geometry, the geometry of flat surfaces. Lines, angles, triangles, circles, squares. Euclid builds it all from scratch, using only 5 foundational assumptions, what he calls postulates, and 5 common notions about equality. Books 7 through 9 move into number theory, prime numbers, even and odd numbers, the relationship between numbers. And tucked into Book 9, at Proposition 20, is one of the most beautiful proofs ever written in the history of human thought. The proof that prime numbers are infinite. We will come back to that. Book 10 is one of the most technically complex, dealing with irrational quantities, numbers that cannot be expressed as a simple fraction. The kind of numbers that, legend has it, drove an ancient Greek mathematician named Hippasus to his death when he discovered them, because they shattered the Pythagorean belief that all things were made of whole numbers. Euclid did not flinch from them. He mapped them with extraordinary precision, and books 11 through 13 return to geometry, but now in 3 dimensions. Solid geometry, cubes, pyramids, spheres, and the grand finale. Book 13 ends with the construction and proof of the 5 regular solids, the Platonic solids, the tetrahedron, cube, octahedron, dodecahedron, and icosahedron. Euclid proves that these 5, and only these 5, are the only perfectly regular 3-dimensional shapes that can exist. In total, 465 propositions, every single one of them proven. Every single one of them built upon the ones that came before, like an architectural masterpiece rising stone by stone from the ground up. No assumptions left unexplained, no jumps in logic left unjustified, just pure, perfect, relentless reasoning. What made Euclid's Elements so revolutionary was not just what he said, it was how he said it. Before Euclid, mathematics existed in fragments. The Babylonians had extraordinary arithmetic. The Egyptians had practical geometry for building and land measurement. The ancient Greeks themselves had produced brilliant individual mathematicians, Thales, Pythagoras, Eudoxus, Theaetetus, each discovering pieces of truth. But Euclid did something no one had done before at this scale. He built a system. He took all the scattered knowledge of Greek mathematics and wove it into a single unified logical framework. Starting from just 5 geometric postulates, his opening assumptions, and 5 common notions, he derived everything else through pure logical deduction. As his 5 postulates are deceptively simple. 1. You can draw a straight line between any 2 points. 2. You can extend a line segment indefinitely in a straight line. 3. You can draw a circle with any center and any radius. 4. All right angles are equal to each other. 5. The famous 5th postulate, sometimes called the parallel postulate. If a straight line falls on 2 straight lines in such a way that the interior angles on one side add up to less than 2 right angles, those 2 lines, if extended far enough, will eventually meet on that side. These 5 ideas. That is all. And from them, like a universe unfolding from a single point, Euclid derived all of classical geometry. This method, axioms first, then logical deductions, is called the axiomatic method, and it became the gold standard for all of mathematics, and eventually for all of science and philosophy. René Descartes used it, Isaac Newton used it, structuring his Principia Mathematica in a distinctly Euclidean style. Baruch Spinoza, in the 17th century, even used the axiomatic method to write his Ethics, a work of moral philosophy. That is how deeply Euclid's fingerprints pressed into the clay of Western thought. History has preserved 2 short anecdotes about Euclid. They are brief, but they are unforgettable, and both are recorded in ancient sources. The first story involves King Ptolemy I himself. The great king, ruler of Egypt, a man accustomed to having every door open for him, every path smooth before his feet, decided he wanted to learn geometry. He began studying Euclid's Elements, but the work was demanding. The proofs were long. The logic required patience and concentration that a king, surrounded by flatterers and urgent affairs of state, perhaps found difficult to sustain. So Ptolemy did what kings do. He called Euclid to him and asked, Is there a shorter way to learn geometry? A faster road? A royal shortcut? And Euclid, this mild, quiet, devoted servant of truth, looked at the most powerful man in Egypt and said, without flinching, "There is no royal road to geometry, no shortcuts, no privileges, no exceptions. Not for a student, not for a king, not for anyone. The truth is the same for everyone, or it is not the truth at all." The second story is equally striking. A young student, newly arrived to study mathematics, worked through his first proposition and then turned to Euclid and asked a question that has echoed through the centuries. "What shall I gain from learning all this?" Euclid paused. Then with remarkable calm, he turned to a servant and said, "Give him 3 pence, since he must make a profit out of what he learns." The message was clear. Mathematics was not a trade. It was not a skill to be leveraged for personal advantage. It was a pursuit of pure understanding, of truth for its own sake. If you could not love it for that, then Euclid had no patience for your complaint. These two stories, the king and the student, tell you everything about the man behind the mathematics. Humble enough to speak plainly to power, passionate enough to be offended by those who could not see the beauty of what he was offering to the world. And I want to pause on something, because in all of Euclid's elements, across all 465 propositions, there is one that I believe deserves special attention. Book 9, Proposition 20, the proof that there are infinitely many prime numbers. A prime number, as you may know, is a number greater than one that can only be divided evenly by one in itself. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17. The primes go on and on, but how do we know they never end? How do we know there isn't some gigantic number beyond which all numbers can be factored into smaller pieces and the primes run out? Euclid proved they never run out, and he did it in roughly half a page. The proof is almost terrifyingly elegant. He says, suppose, just for a moment, that there are only a finite number of primes. Call them P1, P2, P3, all the way to the last one. Now multiply all of them together and add 1. You get a new number, n. Now either n is prime, in which case you have found a prime that was not in your list, which is a contradiction, or n is not prime, in which case it must have a prime factor. But if you divide n by any prime in your list, you always get a remainder of 1. So that prime factor must be a new prime, not in your list, which is also a contradiction. Either way, the assumption that there are finitely many primes leads to a contradiction. Therefore, primes are infinite. The mathematician G.H. Hardy, one of the greatest of the 20th century, once said of this proof that it was as surprising as a chess gambit, and yet absolutely inevitable once you see it. He said that no schoolboy could fail to understand it, yet no mathematician of any age could fail to be moved by it. That is what Euclid built. Mathematics that is simultaneously accessible and profound, human and eternal. Let us talk about the reach of the elements, because the numbers are genuinely staggering. After its original composition around 300 BCE, the Elements was translated into Arabic during the Great Islamic Golden Age, around the 9th century CE, where it became a cornerstone of Islamic mathematics and science. Scholars like Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf translated it under the Abbasid Caliph Harun al-Rashid and later al-Mamun, helping to preserve and transmit Euclid's work when much of classical knowledge was at risk of disappearing. From Arabic, it was eventually translated into Latin in the 12th century, opening the floodgates of the European mathematical Renaissance. And when Gutenberg's printing press arrived in the mid-15th century, one of the first mathematical texts to be printed, in 1482, was Euclid's Elements. From that point forward, the Elements became unstoppable. More than 1,000 different editions have been published. In the English-speaking world alone, it remained the standard geometry textbook in schools and universities well into the early 20th century, meaning that for over 2,000 years, virtually every educated person in the Western world learned geometry from Euclid or from a textbook that descended from Euclid. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, famously taught himself Euclid's Elements as a young man. He reportedly carried a copy with him while riding the legal circuit across Illinois and would study it by firelight at night. He later said he mastered all 6 books of Euclid, and that this discipline in logical reasoning shaped how he thought, argued, and led. The great philosopher Bertrand Russell wrote that at the age of 11, he began to learn Euclid from his older brother. He described the experience as one of the great events of his life, as dazzling as first love. Albert Einstein, as a child, discovered a copy of Euclid's Elements and was so captivated by the certainty of its proofs, the way that truth could be established beyond all possible doubt, that he called it his holy little geometry book. Holy little geometry book. These are not ordinary people casually impressed by a textbook. These are titans, a president, a philosopher, a physicist, all humbled and transformed by a book written by a man whose face we will never know. There is one more chapter of this story that must be told, because it is, in its own way, as dramatic as everything that came before. For 2,000 years, mathematicians accepted Euclid's 5 postulates without serious question. The first 4 seemed completely obvious, self-evident truths about lines, circles, and right angles. But the 5th, the parallel postulate, always felt slightly different. It was longer, more complex, less immediately obvious than the others. For centuries, mathematicians tried to prove the 5th postulate from the first 4, to show it was not really a separate assumption, but a consequence of the others. They failed. Every attempt failed, and the failure drove some of them to the edge of obsession. The Hungarian mathematician Farkas Bolyai spent years attempting to prove the parallel postulate. He wrote to his brilliant son, János, begging him not to try, writing in one famous letter, "For God's sake, please give it up. Fear it no less than the sensual passion, because it too may take up all your time and deprive you of your health, peace of mind, and happiness in life." János did not listen. He kept working, and in 1832 he published a short appendix to his father's book, just 24 pages, announcing that he had constructed an entirely consistent geometry in which the parallel postulate was false. A geometry where the angles of a triangle do not add up to 180 degrees, where parallel lines can curve and meet. Around the same time, the Russian mathematician Nikolai Lobachevsky independently reached the same conclusion, and later Bernhard Riemann generalized the concept further, creating Riemannian geometry, the very geometry that Albert Einstein would use in the 20th century as the mathematical foundation of his general theory of relativity. In other words, the crack in Euclid's 5th postulate eventually opened into a door that led to our modern understanding of space, time, and gravity. But here is the profound thing. This did not disprove Euclid. It expanded him. It showed that Euclid's geometry was perfect for the world of flat surfaces, for small scales, for everyday life, for building houses, designing circuits, calculating distances. Euclid still reigns there, completely and magnificently. He was not wrong. He was simply working at a particular scale of reality, and he got that scale exactly, perfectly right. And now, I promised you something. I told you at the beginning of this video that there was an important, striking detail that I would unveil at the end, a detail that even many mathematicians do not stop to fully consider. Here it is. We do not know, with any certainty, whether Euclid was one person. Let that land. Some scholars, a minority but serious, credentialed historians of mathematics, have raised the possibility that Euclid was not a single individual at all, that the name may represent a school of mathematicians working in Alexandria under a collective identity, similar to the 20th century mathematical collective that published groundbreaking works under the fictional name Nicolas Bourbaki, a group of French mathematicians who adopted a single pseudonym and produced decades of major mathematical work. The argument goes like this. The Elements is extraordinarily unified in style and method, but it is also encyclopedic in scope, covering so many areas that it seems almost superhuman for one person to have mastered all of them so thoroughly and to have synthesized the work of so many predecessors. Some scholars note subtle inconsistencies in the text that suggest possible multiple authorship or significant editing over time. Others, the majority view, insist that Euclid was indeed a real individual, that the unity of style across all 13 books reflects the work of a single extraordinary organizing intelligence, and that the scale of the achievement, while remarkable, is not impossible for one supremely gifted person. The truth is, we may never know, and somehow that makes the whole story even more extraordinary. If we have built our civilization on mathematics, our smartphones, our satellites, our bridges, our medicines, all of it rests on a chain of logical reasoning that traces back in part to one name, Euclid, a name attached to no confirmed face, no confirmed birth date, no confirmed grave. We do not even know for certain if the most foundational mathematician in human history was one person or many. And yet, the elements remains, perfect, unshaken, eternal. I want you to think about something as we come to the end of this story. Euclid never sought fame. There are no coins with his face on them, no monuments bearing his likeness. He did not conquer nations. He did not wear a crown. He simply sat down in a city that was already beginning to blaze as the intellectual capital of the ancient world. And he wrote what he knew. He organized what he understood. He built the most logical, most precise, most enduring mathematical structure ever assembled by human hands. And 2,300 years later, we are still here, studying him, arguing about him, marveling at him, and building on the foundation he laid. There is a lesson in this for all of us. Do the work. Do it honestly. Do it with precision. Do it with love, because the work, and if it is true, will outlast everything else. It will outlast empires. It will outlast languages. It will outlast the very memory of your name. Euclid's name survived only by accident, preserved in a footnote of an ancient philosopher. But the geometry, the truth, survived on its own. Because truth does not need a guardian. Truth guards itself. That is the story of Euclid, the man who wrote the world's most famous math book. If this video moved you, if you felt even a fraction of the awe that I feel every time I sit down with this story, please do something for me right now. Hit that like button. It takes 1 second, and it tells the algorithm that stories like this matter. Subscribe to Numbers and Narratives by Bless Right, because we have many more stories like this one waiting for you. Stories about the people behind the numbers, the lives behind the equations, the human drama hidden inside the history of mathematics. And share this video with someone you love, a student, a teacher, a curious friend, someone who thinks they hate math, because I promise you, after this, they will think again. I will see you in the next story.